Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's rant on Totally Killer, a movie that is basically, I can hear the pitch of this movie. It's Scream meets Back to the Future. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. Links in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys. Books 1 through 12. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. From Blumhouse, it's Scream meets Back to the Future. So the premise is this young teenager, young girl, is going out on Halloween. But her mother, from the producers of Megan, but her mother doesn't want her to go out on Halloween because 35 years ago, her friends were brutally murdered back in 1987 on Halloween night. And she ignores her mother and goes out anyway. She goes to a carnival where she is attacked by a crazed man with a knife. She somehow goes into a photo booth, which turns out to be a time machine. The guy tries to stab her. It sets off the time machine, and she ends up back in 87. That is a very low-effort time travel device. Now, in a comedy like Hot Tub Time Machine, you can kind of forgive it if it's funny. The first one's kind of funny. Sequels, I don't know. In this one, it's mixing, I guess, some comedy elements. There's definitely some attempts at comedy here, because there's a lot of jokes about the 80s, but they kind of don't land for me. So one of the jokes is, she asks this woman, what year is it? And she tells her it's 1987, not bothering to be like, why are you asking me what year it is? But she says it's 1987. Can you believe it's 1987 and I haven't tried Coke yet? As a person from the 80s, let me tell you, no one talked that way, ever. So, yeah, there was Coke, but nobody talked that way. Like, oh, the 80s is almost over and I haven't tried Coke yet. I mean, I get it. It's supposed to be a joke, but it's too blatant. So she goes back in time and somehow meets her mom in high school while going to high school. Okay, 1987, they had things like high school registries. You couldn't just walk into a school and start going there. So I'm not understanding how she can even go to high school and participate in the gym class and put on the gym uniform and run into her mother and her friends and be part of their clique. What? It doesn't make any sense. Anyhow, they go up to the cabin where they'll all be brutally murdered, and the same killer shows up. And then at some point she tells her younger mother who she is, and then talks about the future. And she asks, do the machines kill us? And she says, well, they kind of do through TikTok and dance. Which kind of, again, another attempt at a joke. Doesn't quite land. I mean, the lead actress, I gotta say, is pretty good. She's delivering it. The material, though, isn't there. She's pretty good, I gotta say. With better material, I think this movie could have worked. This movie should have been more of a comedy. It's a lot of bloody shots of the bodies for some reason. And this is a very telling scene, too. So she cracks open. Somebody offers her weed, and she's like, oh, it's all dirt and stems. You know, in the future, you'll just get a gummy. It's got more weed in it than you could possibly imagine. I think I'm seeing what the movie producers do. I think the people who wrote this movie, yeah, they're stoned out of their gourd. Probably why the jokes aren't landing. I don't think any of them are actually from the 80s. Screenplay by David Matalon and Sasha Pearl Raver and Jen D'Angelo. Story by David Matalon and Sasha Pearl Raver. Directed by Nachak Khan. Nanachka Khan. October 6th on Prime. Yeah, it's... I love time travel movies. You know how much I love time travel. But, I mean, it feels like such a low effort, guys. Come on. I mean, do something. And then there's a scene, like, it's dumb enough. She goes back in time thanks to a photo booth or whatever the hell it's supposed to be. But somehow, someone in the 80s tells her, well, you only got 7 hours or you'll be stuck here forever. Like, how does that work? How did you make that calculation? This is the least scientific time travel movie I've ever seen. You can't do it like this. You need more. First, it should be, I'd say, go full bore comedy, and then most of that doesn't matter. Most of it. And you can come up with a flimsy excuse for why people can travel in time. The photo booth, even if you did that, the photo booth, like the hot tub time machine, I mean, it was called the hot tub time machine. And they did a whole thing with the hot tub that kind of sold it, at least for a comedy, which again, low bar for the explanation. But this, you've got some semi-serious elements here with the murders. You needed more, or you needed to downplay the murders. Literally, you needed to downplay them and not make them as serious, not show us bodies. Yeah, it's not totally working for me. I gotta say though, the lead, she's good. She's good. I would cast her in something else. The rest of the cast seems fine, but she's a standout. But and you might say, well, this movie is not really aimed at people my age who actually lived in the 80s, and you'd be right, but it makes it inauthentic. It just makes it kind of stupid. You know? I mean, I don't think you had to live from the 80s, in the 80s, to know that somebody wouldn't say, oh, it's 1987. I haven't even tried cocaine yet. That's not a good line. Not a good line. And the killer is just very generic. And doesn't even seem that important in the context of the movie. Like, if you're going to do this as a comedy characters generally have to play things straight. They have to get very serious about what's happening. She is more sarcastic than she is serious. So, the scenes talking about drugs, she's trying to prevent a triple murder. She needs to be like, not quite Sarah Connor level of panic, but high enough there that she's trying to save everybody. And then maybe she changes the past and then endangers her mother in the process. That could probably be, the climax of the third act. Again, time travel, and they're very sort of self-referential in the movie. In the opening scene of the trailer, you got these guys talking about how they hate time travel movies, how stupid they are. I get it. Yeah, that's kind of funny, but only if the rest of the movie kind of works in it. I'm feeling like it doesn't totally work. It's like you're exploiting the 80s and expecting just the era of the 80s to do all the heavy lifting here for the comedy and everything else. And I got to tell you, you almost caught me with a little bit of the nostalgia. I'm partial to the film simply because of that nostalgia, but I'm from the 80s, so I remember all this stuff. So you can't lure me in with the nostalgia and then not hit me with something relatively authentic. For the people who aren't drawn in by the nostalgia, the only thing you got are the 80s and the appeal of that, and that's limited. If you were going to do this, I would say you would need to make it more of an 80s killer. If you're going to do Back to the Future meets Scream, the killer should look like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, closer to that, as opposed to what the guy you have. And he should have more of a flair to him. He looks so generic, like he was an afterthought. Well, we got to put him in because that's a pitch. So I know I'm really picking this trailer apart, but these are elements that I'm very familiar with, and they're billing it as a horror movie. If you're going to bill it as a horror movie, then go the other way. Like, she gets conked on the head and just wakes up in the 80s, and she is doomed if she doesn't stop the murderer. Like, make it darker then. But, I don't know, you're kind of leaning into a comedy and not quite going all the way. Let's see what the write-up says. Oh, wait, I'll do the breakdown. First act takes place in the present day. She is attacked by the killer, ends up in the 80s, where her mom and her friends are going to be attacked by a killer, but her friends are all going to die, but her mom will survive. Second act, she befriends her mom somehow, getting into high school, ends up going on the infamous trip with them to the cabin, where the killer shows up and kills at least one of them. Doesn't save her. And she has to try to save the other people she doesn't know and stop the killer. And get back to the future in time. I assume she gets back to the future where the future is now different and her mother's not all screwed up about this. I mean, that could have been another element too. Instead of showing her mother in the past, in the present, as well-adjusted, together person, maybe show her all messed up. Like, drug addict, borderline drug addict, like, totally, her life is, not great. Like Back to the Future. And then when she comes back from the past, her mother is a better person thanks to her. That would be the end. Now, a horror movie ending could be that she comes back to the future only to find that her mother is not great and her life sucks. I guess you could make that funny. You could probably make it into a horror movie. She saved the other people at the expense of her mother's good life, because her one of her mother's friends ends up marrying the guy, but then she wouldn't exist. Like, again, time travel. It's tricky. All right, let's read the write-up. When the infamous Sweet 16 killer returns 35 years later after his first murder spree to claim another victim, 17-year-old Jamie accidentally travels back in time to 1987, determined to stop the killer before he can start. Yeah, see, that's the problem I have. Accidentally travels back in time. And that they're billing it as a horror movie. Bill it as a horror comedy. Minimum. And make it funnier. You have a lead that can deliver the lines. In fact, since her mother doesn't die, I think her primary concern would be to get back to the present. Unless something in the future happens, like she's about to be killed by the killer in the future, so she has to stop him in the past, so in the future that doesn't happen, in which case how does she get back to the past? Again, time travel. uh, so yeah, I almost want to watch this just to see how they try to figure this out. I have a sneaking suspicion, though, um, they will not do anything particularly clever. But you never know. I may be wrong, but it looks a little lazy, is what I'm going to say. It has the elements I like. They don't seem to be using them to their full potential. It's not that hard to go back to the 80s and figure out some cool stuff to put in it, other than the hair and the clothes. By the way, the hair isn't big enough. You can go on way bigger with the hair. Trust me on this. I grew up in New Jersey. The hair was even bigger. I had a comedy sketch that I never got to do called Big Hair Dance Hour. And the premise of the sketch was the girls' hair was so big they had to wear neck braces to support their heads. So yeah, you could have gone way bigger on the hair. Way bigger. So yeah, and yeah, the killer, just not buying it, man. Kind of looks like Max Headroom. I mean, you designed it for the movie, I get it, but it's a bit generic. Doesn't seem to be old. When you do something like in horror, it's gotta have an oldness to it. That's what gives it validity, not a newness. So, you know, like if you turned him into, I don't know, some kind of, if it tied it into an old legend, if he had done like a parody of Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers. I mean, it's kind of Michael Myers, but it's the smile that kind of undermines the whole thing, I think. It's too 80s is the problem. It's like everybody living in the 80s is trying to be very 80s, and that's not the way it was. Not the way it was at all. A lot of people in the 80s were like living like it was the 70s because that's just the way decades roll. It didn't like flip to 1980 and everybody instantly started wearing all this crap and changed their hairstyle. It was a lot of 70s stuff rolling into the 80s and slowly morphing over the course of the decade. And even some 90s stuff creeping in early on. I get it, it's a movie, but still. It lends an inauthenticness to it. But, I don't know. Feels like these guys smoke a lot of pot because this was the most detailed scene. They knew everything about pot for this scene. And I was just like, oh, okay. And now I know where all your expertise lies. Anyhow, all right, I'm sorry to pick on the movie. I'll probably watch it. I got to be honest. I'd probably still watch it. It's free on Prime. I might watch it. I mean, I already got Prime. And that's it for me, Tony D and Little Joan. It's just my opinion. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more based takes. I will be tomorrow at Wing Night at the Golden Nugget Tavern in Berlin, New Jersey. It'll be Wing Night and How to Hunt the Jersey Devil. Hope to see you there. We'll see you in the next one.